Alright, so this is just your PSA that Titans can one-shot champions too. Right now, Warlocks are kind of just dominating the meta with Handheld Supernova destroying everything in their sights, and I want to just bring attention to an oldie but goodie build, which is Peregrine Greaves on Titan. This essentially allows your shoulder charge on Arc, Void, Solar, and Prismatic to do a lot of damage to champions, mini-bosses, and even Tormentors. Pair this with a high melee stat, you can one-shot most things in the game. Now, one note I want to make is that when you do defeat or deal damage to a high health target, you do get your shoulder charge back for free. It refunds your melee. Now, this to me kind of means that this has a bit of a skill ceiling to it because you want to use your shoulder charge in very specific locations. You don't just want to use it on anything. You don't want to use it on regular red bars or anything below that or even orange bars. You want to use it for those big, beefy, high health targets. Now, there is a problem with this because sometimes those high health, beefy targets can just one-shot you, especially with endgame content and ultimate difficulty. Some of these enemy types will just one-shot you for no reason at all, and it feels like there's nothing you can really do against that. And that's part of the reason why I feel like this build doesn't get enough acknowledgement nowadays, is because people fear that when they are running up to the enemy, they're just going to get one-shot by things. So, in order to close the gap and be able to get up in the enemy's face, we need some way to close the gap easier. Heartshadow. This is a sword that actually got a buff in Renegades, and it's also a sword that really needs more love. It gives you free invisibility. That's all I have to say. Free invisibility on every class. This allows you to close the gap with Peregrine Greaves. This is the nice little key piece allowing us to use our shoulder charge melee in a much safer fashion. Instead of running up on the enemy and then having full line of sight on us, we kind of just appear out of the shadows and just shoulder charge them in the face and they don't even know what happened. It's a very nice pairing that I don't see anybody talk about. And go ahead and give a shout out to one of my old homies who I used to play this game with all the time. This was his idea, his build. I'm not taking credit for this. Umbra Paradox. He doesn't play the game no more, but yeah, this is his build. Scuba Steve. That's an inside joke. Anyways, you get my point. Heartshadow, essentially, heavy attacks made with full sword energy, turn you invisible, and fire exploding void projectiles. Now, the invisibility is the main thing we want from the sword, but I do want to note that this thing is a very high damage weapon. There are times where you just don't have your shoulder charge melee because you whiffed it or you lost the charge somehow and you're waiting on it to refund and you're like on cooldown still. And this sword puts out. Like, this thing puts out. It does a lot of damage. Like, don't discount this thing. Please give this thing a try. Not only is this sword incredibly good for giving us free invisibility, which allows us to close the gap, but even can increase our damage as it gives us free weaken as well. And pairing this with the artifact this season is insane. Things like Void Infestation, this works wonders with Heartshadow because it gives you that weaken and then you defeat that target and then it just goes on to the next weakened target. It just keeps chaining from target to target, which is incredibly fun. Power from Pain is also really good because when we're defeating those weakened targets, we get Devour. And this is also available in every subclass because Heartshadow can be used in every subclass. Speaking of subclass, which one should you pair this with? Now, there are 4 different subclasses you can run this with: Prismatic, Arc, Solar, and Void. Keeping it very simple, if I had to rank which one was best, it would be Void. Now, keeping it simple, Aspects, Offensive Bulwark, and Bastion. Bastion is the main thing we want because it allows us to give ourselves an overshield on demand. This is even more survivability on top of the invisibility we get from Heartshadow. So that's 2 different things we can do to give ourselves an easier way to close the gap with Peregrine Greaves. Shield Bash, no brainer, you have to run this. This is a must pick. Super, entirely up to you. Twilight Arsenal is fun, recommended. And fragments are very specific, and I recommend running Starvation, Persistence, Leeching, and Provision. Starvation is a no-brainer one because you want to have Devour up as often as possible. This just allows you to get that Devour incredibly fast. Then we run Persistence pairing with that, so that makes our Overshield's Devour and the invisibility from Heartshadow to last even longer. Echo of Leeching is so that when we do get a kill with Shield Bash, we start health regeneration. If we have an Overshield, we typically should be able to get a full health regeneration off of this. And then Provision is an immediate no-brainer. When you pair this with Vortex Grenade, you kind of just throw your grenade on an enemy, and you'll get your entire melee back. It's the main reason why I think Void is the best, because this combination of Provision and Vortex Grenades allows you to get your Shield Bash much faster and have a higher uptime than versus any other subclass. So if, say, you whiff it or you lose your charge somehow, one grenade will get you your melee back typically, especially if you have a high enough melee stat. Next up, I'd probably pick Prismatic to be the second best because Knockout and Diamond Lances is a very nice combination. You get a shoulder charge kill, and then you drop a Diamond Lance to be able to throw at something immediately. The reason why I think Prismatic Titan is very good compared to the others is because it allows you to lock down a target a lot easier. So getting the actual shoulder charge kill is a lot faster and a lot simpler to do than, say, other subclasses. But I think it lacks in power compared to Void. Obviously, Hammer Strike, you have to run this. You can't run any other melee. Shackle Grenade is for your unstoppable champions. Super, entirely up to you. I run Blade Fury because it's nice to get Woven Mail with Faceted Purpose, but super, entirely up to you, depending on what you like to run. As for Fragments, Faceted Courage is a no-brainer. This allows us to make our shoulder charge deal even more damage by like 10%, I believe, to any sort of enemy with a debuff of a Darkness subclass type. So that would be our Shackle Grenade or Diamond Lances. If they're suspended or frozen, they take more damage from our shoulder charge. Faceted Protection is obviously a no-brainer pick because it allows us to take even less damage when we are surrounded by combatants. Faceted Dawn, so that when we do get that shoulder charge hit, we gain Radiant, which is very nice. Faceted Purpose is just ingrained into every Prismatic build in the entire game. This is just necessary. I should not need to explain why. And then Faceted Balance, this is just so when we do deal a lot of light damage, we'll get our melee back faster. There's not many ways to get your melee back faster on Prismatic outside of this, so this is just all around the best no-brainer pick, but Faceted Balance is kind of a flex pick that you can swap in and out with whatever you'd like. In third place, I'd probably put Sunbreaker, keeping it simple. Soul Invictus and Roaring Flames. Roaring Flames does increase our Hammer Strike damage at max stacks, which is very nice. Healing Grenade, always a very great survivability tool. Hammer Strike, because you have to run it, obviously. Hammer of Soul is a super I'd run with, but you can go with Burning Wall if you want. And Fragments are very fun because it allows you to have like this nice gameplay loop where you get a kill with your Hammer Strike, which will then scorch nearby targets, and killing those scorched targets will give you even more melee energy as well as create fire sprites. And then picking up those fire sprites will give you Restoration with Ember of Mercy, and just hitting anything with your Hammer Strike will give you Radiant. This one's not too difficult to explain, but I think Solar is in a weird spot. It's definitely strong right now, but if you're going to be running a build on Solar, you're probably going to be running Baby Hammer 9 times out of 10. And I think that the Peregrine Greaves build is just better elsewhere, because the thing with Solar is that it has no damage reduction, and that's what really you need in endgame content nowadays. You have Restoration, which is great for survivability, but it's not DR. You're not getting any actual damage reduction, so you're going to die. You're very squishy sometimes. And finally, in last place, I would put Striker Titan. Keeping it simple, Knockout and Touch of Thunder. You might be wondering why would I use Touch of Thunder over something like Storm's Keep. Storm's Keep is a bit more passive, and this is a running and gunning kind of build. And Touch of Thunder allows our Pulse Nades to drop Ionic Traces. Ionic Traces will feed into our melee, because Arc Titan doesn't really have any great way of getting melee energy compared to other subclasses. So this is like the only real way I saw to kind of circumvent that issue of if you run out of your melee strike sometimes. Super, entirely up to you, but most people will probably default to Thunder Crash. Fragments are going to be Shock, Amplitude, Ions, and Resistance. Shock does allow our grenade to deal a bit more damage. It will jolt those targets. Amplified allows us to drop an Orb of Power, which is incredibly helpful because Striker Titan kind of lacks in the survivability department, so Orbs of Power is great if you have like a decent enough health stat. Ions will make it to where we drop even more Ionic Traces, especially with that grenade, so we jolt the targets with a grenade, drop even more Ionic Traces. Spark Resistance is pretty no-brainer because we're going to be surrounded a lot of the times. The reason why I put this so low is because there aren't really any other fragments that allow you to get that melee back faster. Like, we're using Ionic Traces with Touch of Thunder, and that's kind of lame. So, there's not really many other fragments here that allows you to get your melee back faster. Like, taking melee briefly increases your outgoing melee damage, but really, though, in high-end content, this sucks because in so many areas of the game, there's, like, Chill Touch. So if you take any kind of melee, you can't use your cool melee attack. You can't run anymore to start the Seismic Strike. So, that's kind of wasted. Where's it at? Spark of Recharge, critically wounded. Dumb requirement, because if you're critically wounded, you might as well just die. It's just how it is. Arc Titan to me, bottom of the list, but I want to also say that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Peregrine Greaves is such a very good exotic that you can universally use it on whatever you would like. This is just me spitballing ideas on what type of build you can run. Run whatever you'd like, really. This is a flexible exotic that you can pair with a lot of different things, so whatever type of flavor you want to run with it, you can. Now, watch this montage of me one-shotting a bunch of champions. anyways, that is the video. That is all from me. Like I said, Peregrine Greaves, very strong. Strongly recommend it. Give it some love, especially if you pair it with Heartshadow. Allows you to use this in some situations you really shouldn't be allowed to. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice day.